All right. Well, welcome to the From the C-Suite series brought to you by the Pro Sports Assembly. Today, we'll be providing insight from the perspective of the Chief Financial Officer, and we have two incredible guests joining us from this conversation. Stefanie Meade, the Chief Financial Officer for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and Matt Wojciechowski, Chief Financial Officer for the Dallas Mavericks. And my name is Dionna Widder. I'll be the moderator, and I serve as the Chief Revenue Officer for the Houston Dynamo and Dash, and I'm a proud founding governing board member for this Pro Sports Assembly. So you might be asking yourself, what is the Assembly? Well, it is the first and only member-led organization for people who work in professional sports at teams, leagues, and unions. Currently, our purpose is the advancement of diverse and inclusive leadership across our industry. We want to give a special shout out to our friends at the Dallas Mavericks for the seed funding to get the Assembly launched. And we also want to thank our founding members and teams who have joined us. And we invite others to get by becoming members too. Stefanie and Matt, thank you both for joining us today for this conversation. Let's have you join the room. Hey, there you are. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us.
Good afternoon. Yes, thanks for joining us today. Well, hey, let's first get to know you guys. I think that would be a great place to start. Would love for you both to just sort of share how you got to where you are today, and I'll have you both provide just a brief synopsis of your journey to the C-suite. Stefanie, I invite you to share first.
Sure. Thanks, Dionna, and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for having me. First of all, thank you, Dionna, Laura Dixon, Keisha, Adam, AB, everyone at Pro Sports Assembly. Just thanks for your vision and everything that you guys are doing to advance diversity. So a little bit about my journey. First, maybe just a little bit about me personally. I'm a mom of one amazing, most of the time, 15-year-old daughter. Also a wife and of one very loving and very supporting husband. I come from a big Greek family, sisters, 4 of them, 3 brothers, more cousins than I can count, and probably a couple, 2, 3 nicks in there. So I'm a Cleveland native of Cleveland, and been here all my life. Went to Cleveland State in college. I started out, I thought I wanted to be an engineer. So I started out in engineering. And then shortly after that, transitioned into accounting. Got my business degree, majoring in accounting, started out in public accounting, actually, for Coopers and Lybrand at the time. Got my CPA and was fortunate to work for just some really great clients, starting out in a variety of businesses. Exposed to a lot in a short amount of time. It was a really great experience in public accounting. After a couple of years, I realized I wanted to get, deeper inside the inner workings of the business. And so that's when I transitioned into industry. Started out in financial services, then manufacturing, technology, environmental services. So taking on expanded roles from controller to VP, and then ultimately the CFO role. I've been through acquisitions, integrations, sales of companies, just turning around a company that was distressed. So a lot of great experience, both public and private sector. And also spent some time in the operations side of the business as well. So, along the way, well, first I'll say, regardless of what industry I've been in, I've always been drawn towards the operational side of the business. So just, gaining that deep understanding of how the business operates, all the functional areas. And I think that's really helped me to be, more impactful in my financial role for any organization. I had some really great mentors along the way, and especially early on in my career, starting out, which makes it really meaningful for me to be able to share and pay it forward when I have the opportunity to do that. And I guess I could kind of wrap it up and say the theme of my journey has really been the love of a challenge. Just a lot of hard work, and I think what's most rewarding to me is when I can leave something better than I found it. So whether that be process improvement, automation, rebuilding a team. So I guess the theme of my journey is definitely lives on with the Cavs, because getting through this pandemic together has definitely been something. So I feel, I feel right at home. I feel right where I belong here. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I worked with the Cavaliers for 5 years, and unfortunately our paths didn't cross, but I know you're with a fantastic organization and they're lucky to have you.
Absolutely,
Matt, we'll go to you. Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, my journey. Well, a little bit about myself first. Yeah, married, and I have 3 kids. My daughter's 11, and I have 2 boys that are 9 and 7. So we spend a lot of time with them, especially now that we're all working remotely. I guess, well, first off, I'm from the Detroit area, moved down here about 5 years ago. My journey was a little bit different than Stefanie's. I spent most of my career in sports. So I started right after college, I started doing tax returns and worked for a small CPA firm. Quickly realized that probably wasn't the direction I wanted to go in my career. So had an opportunity to work for the Detroit Lions. So that door kind of opened up for me, fortunately. And what many people don't know is I actually started my career in ticket operations. So I spent my first year working in ticket operations for the Lions, and then slowly transitioned my role into accounting it was a kind of more of a hybrid role, but with Ford Field and the Detroit Lions themselves. So I kind of worked on both the team side and the facility side. Worked there for close to 17 years, getting these kind of like intermittent promotions to kind of keep me on board for a while. And then, about 5 years ago, I kind of just said, hey, is this really what I want? Is there something bigger out there? Like Stefanie mentioned, is there something where I can really make an impact? Process improvement, just leading teams. So moved down here about 5 years ago, and started as the controller. And then about 2 years ago, kind of fell into my CFO role. So been super excited to be down here. Love the Dallas area. The weather is definitely a plus down here. Well, the summers do get hot. So that's pretty much what brought me down here. So.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing. You mentioned you went to Western Michigan University. I'm also from Michigan, went to Central Michigan. So I'll be kind to you throughout this whole conversation.
That's right. Big rivalry. Yes. And I think we also crossed paths at the Detroit Lions, if I'm not mistaken.
We did. Yes, I was a sales rep, and you were in the box office. Maybe you were already in controller position. Yeah. Well, for you throwing to you the first question. For those who don't know the full scope of the role, maybe you can provide some insight and just share some of the core responsibilities as a CFO for a sports team.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, like all would think, it's just really managing the whole financial condition of the company, right? One of the big pieces to this is running a corporate-wide budget, right? Like Stefanie also mentioned, it's funny, we're talking a lot of the same language here, is, I really enjoy the budget process because it gives me a chance to dive into the details with the department heads so you can actually truly understand the operations. You're not making decisions solely focused on numbers, right? Obviously that comes at some point in navigating through your position. But I think that gives me the opportunity to really help make good financial decisions for the company. And it also really gives you a chance to meet people and just learn them and understand the culture as well. So really spent a lot of time with corporate sponsorships and ticketing. Obviously, there are 2 probably biggest revenue generators. So really learning, because there's a lot of reporting that goes on with the league, with those 2 departments specifically. We run we oversee the league-wide audit. So specific to the NBA, and Stefanie knows this, we do 2 very specific audits. It's the BRI audit. That stands for basketball-related income, and it's basically an exercise that sets the salary cap going forward. And then CFS. Not 100% sure what CFS stands for, but you take your kind of conformed your financial statements and you have to map them into a kind of a revenue sharing model so that all 30 teams can kind of be stacked up equally. So that takes a lot of time and effort from our team. There's all these very complicated models that we put together to do that. And what's very challenging is we had a shortened season last year. We played the remainder of the season in a bubble. And, I don't think these policies or these manuals were written to accommodate that or shortened season. So there's just a lot of navigating that we've had to do in the last year or so to get through that. I also, I'm kind of our acting risk manager. So you got to understand all the different insurance policies, the general liability, your property, your cybersecurity. There's a huge focus on that nowadays. And then there's a lot of different player insurance, disability type policies that you got to kind of navigate through with with basketball ops and the league as well. And then finally, it's navigating through like your CEO and owner requests, right? Because there's a lot of these that's, and Stefanie, I'm sure we could probably talk for hours about this, but just really it's having to navigate through those and being very nimble to be able to accommodate, like Mark, if he says, hey, we want to be able to take Bitcoin for tickets or merchandise, like you got to figure out a way to take Bitcoin for tickets and merchandise. So, so it's, but it's challenging and it's a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have so much on your plate and so many different complexities. Actually, we had a question that came in that I think aligns perfectly with this part of the conversation. The question came in from Laura Dixon, a founding governing board member and one of the founders of the Pro Sports Assembly. And the question is, given the BRI drops with most of the team revenue, but team valuation projections are on the rise, meaning the owners have an opportunity to recoup, but players do not. How might this impact future CBA negotiations?
It's a good question. Stefanie, do you want to take this one?
Wow. That's a great question. And man, I was thinking, hey, you've been around a lot longer than I have. I don't know. It is a great question. I don't know that I can answer that directly.
So, Laura,
which I understand. We can move on.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say, if you want, can you repeat it? And I'll see if I can dig in on it a little bit.
Yeah, it's in the question box. Can you see the question box on the bottom?
Yep.
My bad.
Given the BRI drops along with most of the team revenue, but team valuations projections are on the rise, meaning the owners have an opportunity to recoup, but players do not. How might this impact the future CBA negotiations?
That is a good question. I mean, I think the long and short of it is everybody's losing out on this currently, right? Obviously, the players, as revenue drops, their salaries do get impacted. So it's going to be very challenging going forward to navigate through that. So.
Yeah. No, understandable. And it's hard to answer CBA conversations and questions as obviously there's regulations and rules around it. So I appreciate you considering it, and we'll move on to the next one. So Stefanie, stay in the scope. Obviously you came from outside of the industry, and considering your transition, you made into sports, what identified as some of the major differences comparing your experiences?
Yeah. So, first I would say, it's really some of the drivers of the business that I notice as the biggest differentiators. And, first I would say that, we're really fortunate to have a chairman in Dan Gilbert and, the ownership approach that's really deeply invested in the success of the business and the organization as a whole. So that type of approach, gives us the ability to operate in what I would say is, a little bit of a non-traditional way. So this kind of stands out to me as one of the major differences when I compare experiences. So, what does that mean? Well, in past experiences, primary focus is traditionally, enhancing the bottom line, every year grow it, by X amount. But, don't get me wrong, we've got financial metrics, revenue growth, those things are all really important. We've got a lot of metrics that we track on a regular cadence, but at the same time, there's, certain parts of the business, like player related costs, investments that might be made on the basketball side, those more macro type decisions that can drive costs up or down and significantly. So, and it might actually sacrifice profit in the short term for a longer term strategy. So all that being said, that's really one of the major differences that I would say that I see. And then kind of piggybacking off of that, there's just a lot of investment that is required in this industry, which is a huge differentiator. To drive the revenue, you need success. That success requires investment. So I think that stands out. The other thing, particularly with the Cavs, is, and this was really a draw for me, just the tremendous level of impact that this company has on the on the surrounding community through so many giving and support initiatives. We have a community foundation, which is a nonprofit that supports programs for children and families in the greater Cleveland area and surrounding area. It's just, giving is just really a part of the culture, and every team member annually contributes time to those initiatives. So I'm just really proud to be a part of that organization that that has an impact that way. And then lastly, which is something I miss, is just the excitement and energy, in the office that is, there on a big game day or hosting a sellout concert. It's just off the hook. And, nothing that I've experienced in a traditional office setting. So, I miss that, and I look forward to returning to hosting events with full capacity here real soon.
Definitely. We all do, for sure. The next question I was going to roll into is sort of hitting on what you both sort of touched on during both of those, the answers to both those questions. And so as CFOs of sports teams, obviously you lead considerably complex challenges and goals, because ultimately the revenue success driven by individuals in my role and ticket sales and sponsorship areas vary season to season. While at the same time, investment needs coming in from basketball ops and core business functions to drive success. And maybe even Mark Cuban and Dan Gilbert have some extra things they want you to be spending money on. Matt, specifically for you, how do you navigate the uniqueness of the business in your position and with your finance team?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, right? So, first and foremost, our goal is to, our goal and top priority is to build a competitive team to win championships, right? So that almost comes at a cost, right? So they're going to invest in players, and you got to figure out how to balance player investments with running a business, right? So that's, I think, in itself one of our biggest challenges. So we kind of actually here we have two kind of separate budgets. We have a good business budget and then a basketball budget, right? So I mentioned earlier, we dive really deep into the business side, and then we at a high level, we know that what player spending might be, what some of the big initiatives are, like our spending in player analytics has gone up over the last few years a lot. But what's really key to this is having close communications with somebody on that side. So fortunately for me, I have a good relationship with our assistant general manager, and, we're constantly discussing, obviously they don't clue me in way early on player trades, but, they're really good at getting me information on the big player trades, any big contracts that are coming up, any big expenditures that they're signing for. And then, Mark and Sint do the same thing as well. I think we're really good at communicating these things, which is, I think, a key factor into being successful in this area. And then one of our other biggest challenges is cash flow. Understanding the kind of the ebbs and flows of that. A lot of our revenues, and Stefanie, I'm sure it's the same with you, they kind of come through the season, and then yet you're still having to pay players out traditionally throughout the whole year. So those are my challenges.
And Stefanie, as Matt mentioned, obviously the goal is to be profitable and to build like a championship caliber team. What are the key drivers you've identified to transform the profitability of your team?
Yeah. So, kind of along the lines, what Matt described, and really what you described is that, revenue can vary, right, from season to season. and investments can vary on the basketball side. So, depending on what's going on in the business and what investments are being made, profitability might not be the goal, right, for any given year. Now, that's not to say that we don't continually, try to maximize profitability, right? Minimize our risks. And so I'll talk about a couple things that we do. One, I think it's important to provide the right reporting and the right data. So identify and really work on enhancing the metrics that we're using and that are really going to help the business leaders across the organization understand the business, help them make decisions that are going to influence positive outcomes. So, it might be profit center reports, different, operational metrics like that. And Matt hit on this, another tool that, that is actually one of my go-tos for cash. So as soon as I came into the organization, I'm like, we need a 13-week cash flow forecast. So that was one of the first things that I worked on with my team after joining the Cavs. And, it's really, it's short enough to be pretty accurate, and yet it gives us a long enough ramp to be able to, make decisions based on what we're seeing, because there's a lot of ebbs and flows with cash. So, I've even got Nick and Len, our president and CEO, hooked on it. We review it together every week. So, in addition to reporting and metrics, I would say just constantly, innovation and optimization. So very, very key. So in any climate, and particularly in this pandemic. So, really to keep that momentum alive, it's about challenging ourselves and our teams and questioning, to really question our activities. What are we doing in a given day, week, month that isn't adding value? Can we eliminate some of those things? Can we be more effective at doing those to free up more time for, let's say, a strategic initiative? How do we automate manual processes? Can we get just, one source of record for our metrics and reporting, so we don't have, overlapping between finance and our intelligence group? So all these things really lend themselves to efficiencies, which, ultimately find their way to the bottom line. And lastly, I would say, and most importantly, is just really keeping those main things, which is really the overarching goals, is focusing on, enhancing the fan experience and maintaining that winning strategy. So as long as what we're doing is enhancing that and not detracting from it, we got to kind of keep that balance.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Thank you. And you sort of touched on it. You brought it up for a second there, so I'm going to go there. Clearly, we all faced this this year. We faced down the global pandemic, and which impacted the financial health of our respective clubs and leagues. What was the greatest learnings as you navigated through this unprecedented year? And Stefanie, I'll stay with you on that if you don't mind.
Sure. Wow. Yeah. It has been a journey. And so what stands out the most to me, what I've learned about this through this, I guess, is really, I learned a lot about the organization and the culture. I was fairly new to the organization, just about 7 months in, when the NBA suspended the 19-20 season, in mid-March of last year. So, one of the greatest learnings through all the uncertainty is just, honestly, what an amazing team and organization and culture that I became a part of. And, we were deep into budgeting. Talk about budgeting. We were budgeting, strategic planning for our upcoming fiscal year at the onset of COVID. And that was just out the window, right? And all teams across the organization just rose to the occasion and really, demonstrated the ability to be flexible, quickly pivot. I talked about innovation. There was a lot of that going on. And so, sure, from a financial perspective, we had to buckle down, really get granular with the business and go into our business essentials spending mode, focus on preserving cash, and really everybody just contributed to that. But really out of that journey came a tremendous amount of creativity, innovation, and just really amazed with how the team responded. Some examples, like we couldn't obviously host large events, so our teams came up with creative ways to use our building. Of course, COVID safety protocols all followed, but we held basketball clinics, blood drives, we collected and distributed food. We held voter registrations. We also became a polling location in the last election. So, on top of that, just, all the teams found innovative ways and really played a part in, bridging us back to hosting games and events to full capacity. So, a lot of uncertainty ahead still, but we learned a great deal. I feel like this team is closer and more aligned than when we went into the pandemic, and I think we're going to come out of this a lot stronger on the other side, and I'm looking forward to that.
Aren't we all? Matt, what have you learned through this experience of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think one of my greatest learnings is just to be proactive, right? Like we could have all sat back and just waited to see how like business would unravel. We could have sat back and waited to see what happened with the pandemic. We could have sat back and waited to see how the kind of the social and racial injustice could have unraveled, right? But what I want to point out is we have a tremendous leader here at the Dallas Mavericks in Cint Marshall, who I think was like born to do things like this. So I think right from the get-go is she put us on the right track, right? So, right off the get-go is we put together a business continuity plan, right? Like, we could have sat back and done nothing, but we did something that addressed like travel restrictions, recognizing symptoms, what to do when you got COVID, right? You got to remember, this is early on when nobody knew anything about this, but we sat down as a team and we did all of this. We put together a manual that highlighted policies on working from home, right? Nobody knew what to do working from home, right? We quickly rolled out Microsoft Teams, right? It seems easy now. We're all using the virtual platforms, but I think within a week we had everybody up and running, right? We got our sales teams on IP phones, right? They were literally able to still kind of answer the phone and be responsive to customers. We activated an emergency response system. And then we quickly implemented a solution that would help us automate our accounts payable system and the processing of invoices, right? Like we would still have to get mail here. And I think we're 90%, virtual or, automated in that aspect. Addressed office protocols, right? What happens when you need to come into the office? We defined a lot of these policies. We got apps that were able to track people coming in and out of the office. You had to get approval to come in, right? And then that would help in contact tracing. We also gave employees access to a lot of mental health resources, right? What you don't realize is everybody's kind of in a different situation, right? Mental illness, managing anxiety, they're all real things, right? How to stay connected with others, right? Talking to your kids about COVID, right? Imagine having that conversation right when this was going on. It was, there was a lot of unknowns about the whole thing, right? And then, so we rolled that out very quickly, right? And in the same, simultaneously, really, we started to lend a ton of support, and Stefanie touched on this in the community as well, right? So thanks to the generosity of like Mark and Cint, right? They quickly announced that we would compensate our hourly and part-time employees for the remaining 7 games that were not played, right? So that's just kind of a give back to the community there. We donated $1 million plus in PPE to local businesses, first responders, hospitals, new testing sites. We also partnered with our foundation and other local nonprofits to provide resources and meals, food and childcare for essential workers, right? We focused on mental health services, education, and we also give financial support to the low income and unemployment populations. And then so that was the community side. And then a huge focus on employee engagement as well, right? Everybody's at home kind of not knowing what to do. So our HR department, and several others came up with, we had Foodie Fridays. We had, a volunteer from our organization who would put together kind of their favorite meal and do a little virtual cooking class. We did a step challenge where, you'd have teams versus teams. We'd be logging our steps. So it was just a lot of employee engagement. And then we would have monthly huddles as well, where we would bring in special guests such as our county judge, local health professionals that would give us updates on the COVID. Because again, there was a lot of unknowns early on in this, so I feel like we did a really good job being proactive to address all of these issues. And then lastly, it's really, I'd like to address like the kind of the proactiveness on the social and racial injustice. Again, I'm very blessed to be part of this team and have a leader like Sid who really put us on the right track for this. So long and short of it, we really addressed it. We brought the awareness to our employees in our community. We had these courageous conversations where we would have Mark and Sint were there, as well as some players and local business leaders. And we had those conversations about what was going on around us. And then one of our biggest accomplishments, I think, is we created a Mavs Take Action plan, right? And action stands for something. If any of you guys know St. Marshall, she's very big on acronyms. So action stands for advocacy, communication, training, investment, outreach, and noise. Okay, so advocacy, similar to Steph, we supported the voter registration. We had a local polling site at our arena here. The communication, we had those courageous conversations. Investment, we're supporting an initiative called Operation Connectivity. We're trying to get internet to some of the underserved areas, local areas around us. Training, we have a concept called Mavs Institute, where we have leadership development to focus on diversity and inclusion. We have supplier diversity, and then the outreach portion of it would be focusing on driving awareness and using our Bridges Through Basketball platform to help do that. And then noise, really just encouraging others to be aware and encouraging the change. So I know that was a lot. I probably rambled on for too long, but long and short of it was there was not a lot of financial focus on it. It was just more like being proactive and really supporting the initiatives that were important to address in our community and with our employees. So.
Yeah, I mean, clearly between both what Stefanie at the Cavs and Matt, what you've done at the Mavs, Cavs and Mavs, it's interesting how the team behind the team sort of goes into action in a whole different way, but still meaningful. And the learnings from that, do you see either of your organizations continuing some of these practices and these programs that you started during the pandemic, obviously transition them as you move forward? Do you see most of them staying?
Yeah, well, I mean, 100%. I see them staying. And I can tell you that
the balance of that. Question.
Can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can tell you that 100% we're going to continue these initiatives, and actually in certain areas we are going to increase our investment because we feel like it's that important. So at least from the Mavs perspective, that's where we're at.
Yeah, and I would echo the same. And even more activities because we've been limited in what we could do because everything because of the social distancing, right? So it'll be good to get back out into the community.
That's fantastic. I'm happy to hear that. And then as well as we progress the conversation forward, From the C-Suite is the name of this series, and so some individuals that are listening, obviously, and who have joined us today, may aspire to be chief financial officers of a team just like the two of you. What advice would you share with those individuals? And we actually had a question that came in, and they also expanded on this question a little bit, that shared that obviously this is an intricate field of study. So what advice would you give someone who has been in the workforce or for quite a while and has decided to change course and become an accountant? Is this something they should have started right out of high school, or is there still time? Can you sort of grow into this from another area of the business? Matt,
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. I think nothing's off the table, right? If you want something, I think it's important to go and follow your goals and follow your heart on all of this, right? I think what's really important to do is, if you want to stay in the sports world, I do plenty of networking, right? I'm sure a lot of, it's probably not rocket science, but do a lot of networking. I feel like for me, you need to have a good work ethic, and don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves. Like, just I like to get in the weeds. A lot of people, some people don't. That's just me. Also, if you want to get into sports, I wouldn't be afraid to make a move for the right opportunity, right? Like, so I was born and raised in Detroit, right? And I worked for the Lions for 17 years. The safe play would have been stay there and just ride my career out, right? But instead, I uprooted my family and I moved, right? I just feel like, there's plenty of platforms out there. There are jobs out there. If I were you, I'd find the right one, make the move, and continue to progress your career if that's what you want to do, right? I think be a good communicator and a good listener, right? I think that's not going to get you to be a CFO. I think that's just good in business in general, right? And then lastly, just joining groups like this, like Pro Sports Assembly. It's a great way to position yourselves for success in the future. Did we lose Dionna? Oh.
nope. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I'm freezing. I think I can still hear you both, so thank you. And Stefanie, for you, obviously, women are significantly underrepresented in the C-suite, and specifically in your position. What advice and encouragement would you present to the audience who feel that getting there is impossible for them?
Well, I think to start, I would say you got to believe it is possible. If actually, that's one of our isms. You'll see it when you believe it. So it's really part of our culture. But I've always felt that way. If you think you can accomplish something or think you can't accomplish something, you're right. So, first, I tell my daughter when she steps into a tennis match where she's the underdog, I say, you need to get in there, believing with your heart and your mind that you have what it takes to win. And, that's half the battle. So, otherwise you've already counted yourself out. So along those lines, I've never really considered my gender as a disadvantage to succeeding in what I set out to do. And I've always set out to be my best and just really believe I had the ability to influence that. So some advice. So one, I would say, and this is really for anyone, that wants to advance their career. And I think the things that really have guided me throughout my career is just one, being authentic. You're not going to excel at being someone else. So, stop comparing yourself to the person, across the table, know your own strengths, know your blind spots, and keep working at those. I've got quite a few of those. And along the way, just be authentic. So, the second one, and I think Matt hit on this, is just, hard work. You got to be willing to roll up your sleeves. You got to be willing to take on new responsibilities, just go after things without being asked, particularly the things that no one else, is prepared to do or wants to do. So I think that really helps to demonstrate how you can add value. And that really helps you advance yourself. Next, I would say grit matters. And so, growth and comfort are, can't really be used in the same sentence. We just got to get uncomfortable. And getting comfortable, getting uncomfortable. So, the setbacks and adversities happen. They happen to all of us. And, the path to where you're going is sometimes crooked. Sometimes it go backwards and never straight. So, you take those setbacks as lessons. Just dig in and find a lesson there. And lastly, I would say, spend just as much time, if not more, growing and developing your team, encouraging them, recognizing them. Don't be so concerned about getting the credit, just let's have progress. That's my motto. And also don't shy away from difficult conversations with your team. I think it's really important to have those sometimes, and they can make all the difference in somebody's development. So you can't be a leader if nobody wants to follow you. So you gotta really spend time with your team. So those are my 4.
Those are fantastic 4, and I would agree completely. Thank you for sharing. And I'm going to move it over to some questions from the audience, if you guys don't mind. We have a couple of questions. I think we have a couple more minutes here. So our first question comes in from Greg Zinmeister from the Chicago Blackhawks. He's actually also a founding member of Pro Sports Assembly. And his question's about budgets, my favorite financial conversation. So when considering, what considerations do you give to the expense side of the budget from a revenue generating department, both from a planning perspective and an ad hoc request standpoint? Matt, do you want to take that one?
Interesting. I think a lot of this goes back to, really understanding the budget, right? Like me personally, I'm not afraid to make the investments if there's good revenue opportunities, right? I think it all has to make sense or just really for the department and for the organization. So I don't, a lot of those are just taken case by case, right? Obviously, when you do your budget, you're not planning for everything, every possible scenario that might shake out that year. So, having good relationships and be able to talk through these and getting different perspectives, I think is really important.
Fantastic. And Stefanie, another question that came in, let's see here. It was a question that came in from an earlier thing that you had brought up. Let's see here. Where did we go? Oh, what is surprisingly fun about being a CFO? Because everybody thinks, the CFO job is so hard. So what's fun about the CFO position?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think you bring your own fun to the table, right? whatever role you have, if you can't laugh at yourself or, but I think if I described fun, people wouldn't get it. I like digging into things too, just like kind of what Matt said. I don't want to live in the weeds, but I really like digging into things and, solving problems, figuring things out. That's fun. And I really do enjoy, like I said, getting involved in other areas of the business, sitting down on a sales side and understanding how they approach things and different perspectives. I think just seeing all the different, how all the different pieces come together, it is fun. And particularly working for, a sports and entertainment organization, there's a lot of fun. We make it a lot of fun.
Perfect. And then Matt, another question that came in, this one from Amanda Shank. What was the most difficult leap in your career, director to VP or VP to C-suite? How did you navigate that leap?
Yeah, it was, well, I guess I would probably say it was more like the VP to the C-suite because, now you're kind of the end all your decisions actually, you're kind of the final decision maker on a lot of things, right? Where before you always had somebody to kind of help you vet those out. So I think, where I'm never going to tell you that I've always had the right answers. I think what's really important is have a good team that you can rely on to actually bounce things off of as well. So definitely that's probably the most challenging leap, but also the most rewarding too.
And another question, Marissa Melly from the Green Bay Packers, question came in was, what is one thing you wish non-finance professionals knew? Stefanie, you want to take that one?
Well, I don't and never have counted beans.
For a non-finance, I would say everybody always asks us, what do you do in the off season? Okay, well, guess what? There is no off season for the finance side of things. That's typically when we go through and do all of our audits. And when for me at least, I don't know if it's the same for you, that's typically when we're busier, is typically in the off season. So
yeah. And in all seriousness, though, we're not just number crunchers, so I refer to the counting beans because, you hear that throughout your career. But in all seriousness, I think, sometimes we get, put in this stigmatized as like number crunchers, and really that's not the case. It's a lot more. We're business partners, and we offer strategic insight and can be change agents. So I think that would be the one thing I wish non-finance professionals knew.
And then another question that came in, I think you both could probably answer this one, but what role or task best prepared you for your current position?
So I guess I can take that first. It's interesting because, I never really imagined a career in sports. And so, I think, like I said, I think I mentioned it earlier, I feel right at home. I feel like this was just a really, a perfect transition for me. I think, coming out of industry, I just, have had a lot of experience with a lot of different industries. I think I bring a different perspective to the table. So talk about diversity. Diversity isn't always, color or race. It's also thought. And so I think that I bring that to the table. And also coming into this role and then going right into a pandemic. I had just come from a company that I was doing a turnaround. So it was a really highly distressed company, and it was, turning it around. And so I go right from that into a pandemic. And although that wasn't, it wasn't necessarily all about finances for us, but we did have to buckle down. And I brought some things to the organization that I think really, really helped out in that situation.
And I think for me, it was more the practical experience, right? Have been in sports for 22 years, right? So having spent that much time in, I mean, I was involved in a lot of things from the ground up, right? Like, I was involved in basically in opening up a stadium, right? So you just learn a ton of implementing different systems, right? From accounting systems to retail systems to CRMs, so you learn that, and then you take it to your next position, and you can expand on it, and you just keep expanding, and then you kind of learn how to deal with people in sports too, right? Through all those years, because that can also be a challenge, right? Or just people in general. But I think for me, it's just that practical experience, and just in trying to retain the goods and the bads from it, and just learning from it.
Fantastic. And then, obviously we started off learning more about you, and you guys both shared that you're parents, and you have families, which I love. I'm a mother myself. And this last question I'll throw at you both came in from Edgar Valise from my club, the Houston Dynamo FC. Wanted to know, how do you get your work-life balance in your role, knowing that you have so much that you can continue to work on, and that your days are long and your years are also long? Stefanie, you want to go with that one first?
Sure. Well, first I'll say, with all the technology and devices that we have access to, I mean, really the boundaries between work and personal life, they're all really blurred, And so sometimes that is a benefit, and sometimes it can hinder your balance. For me, it's about, I'm very, very, very deliberate about, working out. I have to work out. I can't, I'll be very crabby if I don't. I've been strength training for like 15 years. I get up at 5 a.m. I hit the gym, at least twice a week. And then I'm a cyclist. So when it's nice, I'm on the road. right now I go to the studio and ride. So I need to have that. And really, I feel so much more balanced when I keep that in my life. And, making time for family is also a priority. I schedule it, tennis match, going traveling all around the Midwest, watching my, supporting my daughter's tournaments and stuff. So I think you just have to be really deliberate about it. Almost to the point where you just schedule it in your calendar.
Yeah, I agree. I think, something I've learned recently, it's not a balance, it's more of an integration, right? You just have to integrate it into your life, right? Because you know how demanding that your jobs are. So, I will put things on my calendar, like I have one of my kids' sporting events that's at 5. So you just schedule things around it. You almost just have to make it work. And I think we're all fortunate. Everybody on this call is fortunate that we work in sports. So you get to spend time with your family at sporting events. Like I get to bring my 2 boys to basketball games, right? Like they think it's the coolest thing ever, right? So I think, it's you do have to balance, but you also have to make it a point, to Stefanie's point, be deliberate, and you just have to integrate them both.
Yes, this is definitely a lifestyle, no doubt about it. Well, thank you, Stefanie and Matt, for the great conversation and the insights that you provided us today. And thank you to you all for your time and joining us for the C series. While this content is currently open access, we will be transitioning to members only content. So we invite you to become a founding member of the Assembly and get in on the ground level and help us shape the Assembly as it grows. Visit prosportsassembly.org to learn more and get involved. And if we can get it to work, we will have a video that will play here at the very end. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Stefanie. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
So what is the Pro Sports Assembly? We're the people who work in professional sports, at teams, leagues, and unions who are committed to the advancement of diverse and inclusive leadership across our industry.
From staff, administrators, and executives to team owners, operators, and innovators, we strive to lead by example.
As a member of the Assembly, you will join industry leaders and gain professional development tools, have access to an exceptional network, be invited to participate in forums and fellowships for professional development, attend exclusive events, and engage in discussions led by industry executives.
So why now? Professional sports is at an inflection point. Our industry has great influence, global reach, and incomparable community impact.
Pro Sports Assembly.
Pro Sports Assembly.
Pro Sports Assembly.
United in game plan.
Diverse in counsel.